Well, good morning. I'm Terry Girton, and I'm the president of the National Academy of Public Administration. I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. What promises to be a very interesting, provocative set of discussions. But like all good plans, nothing survives first contact with the enemy, and so our schedule is going to be a little different from the beginning. Because we are very pleased to have our first speaker, but the schedule just needs to change a bit. So we're going to jump right into that, and then Dean Knott and I will come back up to kind of catch us back up to the regular schedule. And with that in mind, I'm very honored to introduce our first speaker. No one has a better insight on the challenges that states are facing than California's Attorney General, Xavier Becerra. And no one has been more solution-oriented. From his time in the California State Legislature to his 12 terms in Congress as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and now in his current position, Attorney General Becerra has fought for working families by advocating for solutions to combat poverty that include job promotion, health care, clean energy, technology availability, and the sustainability of the Social Security and Medicare programs. He has the perspective and insight earned through decades of Washington leadership experience, where he served as chairman of the House Democratic Caucus and ranking member of the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Social Security. And he has the frontline experience of a state legislator representing the 59th Assembly District in Los Angeles County. So he's uniquely positioned to kick off our conversations for today. Please join me in welcoming California's Attorney General, Xavier Becerra.
Terry, first, if I can say to you, thank you very much for the invitation and for helping my schedule by adjusting your schedule. I appreciate it to all of you. Thank you very much for that as well. Can I just do a quick poll? How many of you are not from California? Okay, so we have a number. Anyone from Texas? Yeah, because obviously right now is a critical time for the folks in Texas. If I could just begin by saying our thoughts and prayers are with the folks in Texas because it seems to continue to get worse. We heard that some of the levees were breached this morning, and so the flooding will continue. And for those of us who are concerned about the way we can all, as leaders, put into action our best ideas, Texas will be a really good case of whether we can do this well. Texas will prove to us if we can put our best ideas forward, but do it in a way that breaks beyond our partisanship, our regional differences, and gives us a chance to actually help people, which is what I think most of us hope we do when we set policy, is help people. And so I think all of us are hoping that not only do the people in Texas make it through this difficult time, but at the same time that we're all coming together to figure out how to do it well for them. To those of you who are here and hoping that what we can do is learn a little bit more because of the success of California, I want to tell you that I want to focus some of my remarks on that because you don't become the 6th largest economy in the world. I'm being told now that's number 5. The folks in Great Britain would probably tell me, no, that's not yet the case. But you don't become the 6th largest economy in the world as a nation state without doing something right. And while we have a number of problems that we have to address here in California, we have the challenge of housing. We have the issue of how we're going to deal with cannabis now that it's been legalized in the state of California. The fact is, we figured out the secret sauce. Don't tell me what the ingredients are, but it's working. And what we want to do is continue it forward because we're creating more jobs than any other state. We are the number one industry state when it comes to the manufacturing industries. Number 1 in ag. We're number 1 in high technology, green energy, graduates from college, beautiful people. The list goes on and on and on. And I think it's important that we recognize that we have some tremendous assets here in the state of California, and it's important for us to utilize those in the right way. So, Terry, I want to thank you again for letting me be here. I want to say to Dean Jack Knott, thank you for hosting, for providing the auspices for everyone to gather and to do this. USC has done some tremendous work, has made some tremendous strides as an institution of higher education. I know this because I represented Los Angeles for over 24 years, and to see what USC has done. In fact, I think their academics are better than their football team now. So that's a pretty good mark. Although you have a pretty good football team. Well, wait till you meet up with Stanford, and then we'll talk. I want to say a big hello to someone who has been very special to the state of California as well, and whom you probably know as a major champion of not just policy, but keeping people healthy in the state of California. And Diana Dooley has done a tremendous job as the governor's choice to lead the charge when it comes to health care in California. And she's done just fabulous work. I've had the chance to get to know her both as a friend, but also as a colleague. We've gone at it as friends where we absolutely agree and charge together, and where we go at it as friends where we don't quite agree, but we figure out ways to get there. And she's the kind of person you want to have when it comes to getting policy done. Someone who actually understands what she's talking about and then is willing to find that common ground, that sweet spot where you can get it done. So here's what I wanted to just say in terms of what I hope you're here to discuss. As far as California has gone, I can take you to parts of the state where people think that they were completely missed by this economic recovery. I can take you to places where people say, we see every day in our work this vibrancy that is the California economy, but it's not trickling down to us. I just earlier this week had a conversation with some of my legal team where we're having to initiate actions against some subcontractors in the cleaning industry because of the way they're treating their personnel. But the difficulty for these workers who clean the stores and establishments throughout the state is that because they're hired by subcontractors, and these subcontractors oftentimes are fly-by-night, it's tough for them to ever secure what they were owed in terms of their wages, their benefits, because these subcontractors disappear and reappear somewhere else as something else. But these employees, if you look at them, you would assume they're working for some of the most fashionable retail establishments in California, in some of the best-known stores, box stores that you and I populate every day as we go buy our merchandise. But they can also say, well, we're not aware of this because they don't work for us. And yet these are the folks that make it possible for you to feel really good about walking into these establishments every day. And yet they're among the people who are desperately living on the edge, not knowing if they'll have enough in the paycheck to cover the rent or the bill for having taken their son or daughter to the doctor. And so we know we have challenges in California. But here's the difference. We're doing something. Yesterday, the governor and the legislature reached a tentative agreement on what to do with housing. Earlier this year, the governor and the legislature reached an agreement on how to improve our roads and highways and our mass transit system. This year, we are moving forward on a way to deal with racial profiling by our law enforcement officers on the streets and highways of California to make sure that everyone believes that they're receiving justice and public safety from the people who wear the badge. We're doing something. And what I've learned over 26 plus years in elected office is that the most important thing to people is not that they are with you or you're with them when it comes to their values. It's that you're getting things done. You're doing something. And I must tell you that right now, people sorely miss the days around this country when their leaders were doing something. And so perhaps I can tell you best that what I believe makes California this attractive place to come is that we're doing something. Take a look at what is California. We're, for the most part, a desert. We are a place where not a flood, not a hurricane, but an earthquake could destroy things in a matter of seconds, not weeks or days. Yet we've grown to some 40 million people. We have a higher rate of contribution by taxes than most states for its 40 million people. We have a more rigorous level of standards and regulations that you must meet, whether it's in your business or private life. Try to buy a house here in California now. But somehow it's working. And I think it's working, and here I think is the key, is that California's decided, we get it. We know that there's no way that a place like California should be the #1 breadbasket in the world, except for the fact that the miracle of irrigation has allowed us to send water into the Central Valley and therefore be able to produce more food than any other place in the world. And we also know that there's probably only a few places in the world where you would want to live where you could actually snow ski and water ski on the same day. And so we get it. There's a premium to live in California, and there's a premium on top of that to live well in California. And we pay it. That transportation legislation that was passed that's going to help us improve our roads and bridges and highways and mass transit, that was not free. On top of the money you pay if you're in California to get a gallon of gasoline, that costs more than any other place in the country because, except maybe Hawaii, because we reformulate it differently to be cleaner. We're going to now add a little bit more to make sure we take care of those roads and bridges and highways and mass transit. That housing bond that's going to be on the ballot, that's going to take a little bit of money out of everybody's pocket as well. But we're willing to pay something to live in California. There are too many places that have been duped into believing that you can have it all and not have to pay for it. And probably the #1 place where that's occurring right now is the place I just left, Washington, D.C. And so how you can have your tax breaks and still do everything you need to do to provide for your people at the same time, talk to the veterans in America today, and they'll tell you what it means to give service and not get it back once you're back in your home country. And so California has a lot to do. We face many challenges. But what we've figured out is that freeloading is not for us. And if you want to freeload, then California really is not for you. And so what we have to do is just figure out how we can keep everything within that margin where everyone can feel good that they're contributing and they're getting the benefit of what they're providing. And my job as the Attorney General is to make sure I tell the governor and the legislators and everyone in California, including Secretary Diana Dooley and everyone else who's working on this, that if you're going to continue California moving forward, having clean energy, clean water, clean air, the best university system in the world, a housing program that will let everyone live close to where they work, then I've got your back. Because I will defend everything we're doing, regardless of the attacks or the headwinds we may face. And if I can do that, then I believe California will continue to move forward. And so my job is a great one. I get to sort of nod at what our people are doing and say, do it. Get it done. I've got your back. And so when our efforts to try to clean our environment are threatened, no, we've gone too far. We're not pulling back. When someone from Washington tries to tell us that we should separate families simply because that family has immigrants in it, we say no. If they're working hard in this state, they're doing what my parents did as immigrants, building California, no. We've got their back. And if it comes to someone who says we're going to get rid of that health care that in California reduced the uninsurance rate in our state by half, and someone says, no, we're just going to get rid of it, we say no. And we tell Diana Dooley and our folks in the healthcare sector, we've got your back. It works. We're doing fairly well. We know we have our challenges, but the bottom line for us is if you're willing to contribute, you get to stay on the wagon. And if you stay on the wagon, let me tell you, it's a pretty good ride. Don't forget your skis, both your water skis and your snow skis because it's a pretty good ride. And so my message to you is, at the end of the day, let's help people understand that all folks want is for us to get things done. And there are ways to do it. We haven't figured out all the best answers, but I haven't tasted a sauce that tastes better than California's secret sauce. And until someone does come up with something better, I'm going to tell the governor, you move forward. I've got your back. So thank you very much for letting me come by. Look forward to working with you sometime in the future. Thank you. Terry.
Thank you very much for that inspiring talk and for the message of it to get things done. In some ways, that's what the National Academy is about, how to implement, how to design policies that make a difference. So I really appreciate that. I'm Jack Knott. I'm the Dean of the USC Sol Price School of Public Policy. I'm really pleased to be here in Sacramento, in part because we have a great center here. It offers the Master of Public Administration degree and does a number of outreach events here with the state and the policy community here. And we do a lot of executive education here as well. This room is a room I find myself in periodically because this is one of our favorite rooms for doing these kind of events with its history and ambiance. So we're really pleased we're in this room as well. So a very warm welcome. This is the first in a set of regional NAPA, National Academy of Public Administration's gatherings focused on governing across the divide, which is the big issue facing the country today. And for this particular meeting, we're going to focus on the role of the states. And so it's especially appropriate to be here in California, as we just heard. And I also want to say welcome to Sacramento. A lot of people, when they come to California, they go to San Francisco, they go to LA. Maybe not as many go to Sacramento, but it's a very interesting place. For those of you who are new, the name really comes from the Sacramento River, which came from a Spanish cavalry officer who took it from Santissimo Sacramento, or Blessed Sacrament, in the Catholic Eucharist. So that's where the name comes from. It's also called the City of Trees. Coming from Michigan, I have a little hard time thinking that's the case, but according to MIT's Treepedia project, which mapped the urban tree canopy in major cities, Sacramento's canopy was measured as the most robust of any city in America, which is, if you look outside here, there's some pretty beautiful trees. Along with this distinction, and this one I'm having a little hard trouble with, but, I should mention that in a recent survey, Sacramento was named the 4th hippest city in America. Now, for my colleagues here from the Bay Area, I should mention that San Francisco is ranked number 9. But, it does have a pretty bridge, so it has some things going for it. Which brings us to the subject of the states and their profound variety of people, geographies, cultural traditions, politics, and economies. Our history as a nation, of course, in many ways is a history of the states. It was the states, after all, that created the federal government, not the other way around. And while it is true that many of the countries in the world are divided into states, provinces, districts, and so on, those often tend to be implementing policy, not a sovereign source of it. And that's a big difference. That's it, as we all know from our American history classes and from the news, the sovereignty of the states has brought both progress as well as intense conflict. If you will reach back into your undergraduate memory, and for me that's a long reach, you'll recall that the proper role of the states has been a hot-button issue from the founding of the Republic. Citing the 10th Amendment, limiting the power of the federal government relative to the states, Thomas Jefferson said, "To take a single step beyond these boundaries is to take possession of boundless fields of power no longer susceptible to any definition." So he was very concerned about the federal encroachment of power. Though he shared some of Jefferson's concerns, George Washington's passion for unifying the states ran deep. In a letter unanimously endorsed by the Constitutional Convention, Washington wrote, "In all our deliberations, we keep steadily in our view that which appears to us the greatest interest of every true American, the consolidation of the Union." Now, there are inherent tensions between state sovereignty as demonstrated by the sharp partisan political divide now between the coastal states and the rest of the whole interior. It's basically Oregon, Washington, California, and the New England states, and that's a massive political divide. The same sovereignty, however, has also been a profound source of innovation. In the 1932 Supreme Court decision, Justice Louis Brandeis described the states as the laboratories of democracy. And what incredible laboratories they are. Consider their manpower. State and local governments employ some 7.5 million people and account for most of the growth of public employment in recent years. And contrary to popular political thought, the civilian federal workforce is only a fraction of the size of the state and local workforce at 1.4 million people. Likewise, the majority of our NAPA members, Terry, actually come from state and local government. And as they grow, the states are playing an increasingly dynamic role in developing new models of governance and economic policy. As you just heard from our Attorney General, you have probably been treated to the special pleasure of hearing at great length why California is the most dynamic, naturally beautiful, culturally diverse, and overall most important state in the world. With just shy of 40 million people, driving a $2.5 trillion economy, we are at the forefront of education, healthcare, immigration, and diversity, innovation and entrepreneurship, and environmental quality. For better and for sometimes worse, we are also pioneers in governance. It was California's ballot proposition mechanism that enabled voters to directly alter the state's constitution. This has advantages since it enables the people to pass laws that would never be adopted by the state legislature, like the creation of the Independent Commission on Redistricting, most recently, or Proposition 87, which substantially altered the fiscal relationships between the state and the localities. On the other hand, not all propositions are quite that impactful or sensible, and the ballot initiative is one of the reasons why California, and some of you know this, has the longest state constitution in America at 500 pages, possibly the longest democratic constitution in the world. Although Californians do like to boast, I've also just demonstrated the reality that states across the nation are innovative and making important progress. And here's some examples. Massachusetts established the health care reform law in 2006 that became the model for the Affordable Care Act. Texas has developed model electronics recycling laws that build on voluntary recycling that is the model for the nation. Wisconsin has been a leader in welfare-to-work programs. North Carolina is a right-to-work state with a favorable tax system that is attracting entrepreneurs looking for a move into a ready environment for business. Tennessee was an early leader in extending health care to rural areas. Several states have been leaders in fostering legislative and regulatory changes conducive to innovation, among them Delaware, Indiana, Michigan, South Dakota, and so on. So there's lots of examples of very exciting things happening in the states. And here we run into an irony. In an era where people are in many ways more connected than they ever have been, states are often missing opportunities to learn from the successes and failures of each other. At the risk of sounding a little Pollyannish, often it's not that we lack solutions to our problems, but that the solutions haven't been tapped. And over the course of American history, we have gone through turbulent chapters where finding constructive ways forward was not just desirable, but imperative. And I believe that we're in one of those periods today. Our country needs constructive, enlightened, and courageous public policy, public management, and leadership. Like many of you, I feel that urgency most keenly when I'm with my children and with my grandchildren. They have a way of relocating your concerns about the future from your head to your heart. So Terry Girton points the way to a better future, and she reminds us in the remarks in the printed program that NAPA is uniquely positioned to work with government practitioners to facilitate conversations that lead to practical solutions that can begin to restore trust in government. And I'd say that hits the nail on the head. So let's use today to lay the groundwork for those conversations. Now, to restore trust in government, we need leaders who think broadly and work collaboratively and engage in the public wholeheartedly. It is NAPA's good fortune to have a leader such as Terry who exemplifies these aspirations. She has a deep experience in a remarkable variety of arenas, having served her country as an Army officer, a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy for the U.S. Department of Labor and Veterans Employment and Training Service, and a member of the Senior Executive Service in the Department of Defense. Her leadership has earned her the Meritorious Presidential Rank Award, the Distinguished Presidential Rank Award, and the Decoration for Exceptional Civilian Service. And I've found that she is a really good and wonderful colleague. So please give a warm welcome to Terry Gerton, President of NAPA.
All right. Well, good morning again. And thank you, Jack, for that kind introduction. But more importantly, thank you for making your team and your staff available to help us plan this event. I need to give a shout out to Janet Denhart and Lois Takahashi and Juliet Lee, who have worked so hard on the ground here to pull this together. And also to my NAPA team back in D.C., Elijah Evans, Brenna Isman, and Betsy Holohan, for all the work that they've done to collaborate to actually get us here today. So I thought I would talk a little bit about why we're here and kind of how we got here. I took over as the president of the Academy in January. And so one of the first things I did was survey the fellowship. Can I just have a hand up if you're a NAPA fellow? Wonderful. Thank you all for being here today with us. If you filled out that survey, you might remember some of the questions we asked, but two themes came through loud and clear. The first was that NAPA had gotten too DC-centric. It's where we live. It's kind of where we commute, but we were missing a big portion of our population. And so there was a solid desire for us to get out to different parts of the country to meet our fellows where they are, and also to spend some time talking more about the role of state and local government and how it impacts how we work today. So I was processing those survey results at about the same time as we were all processing the results of the presidential election in February. And I found this fascinating sort of intersection. We call this seminar series Governing Across the Divide, and you'll notice we didn't specify which divide. We leave it to the reader to fill in the one that is of most interest to you because the list is long, right? But so we thought that tackling some of the issues that became so clear during the presidential election, while at the same time getting out to talk to people outside the Beltway, was one of the ways that the Academy could use its unique position, its unique voice, and more importantly, its role in advocacy to really help elevate some core conversations and maybe change the direction of some of those. And so particularly, we wanted to bring together experts from various perspectives to meet and talk together. It's very hard to have a confrontational discussion when you're sitting across the table from someone, as opposed to just lobbing sound bites through the media. So we wanted to get people together for those conversations. We wanted to talk about the significant governance challenges facing our nation at all levels, not just at the federal level, but what's happening in states, what's happening in counties and communities across the country. We wanted to be solution-oriented. One of the things we're going to press you on today when we finish with our group discussions is, what are the solutions to the challenges that we've raised? It's one thing to just identify problems, but we want to walk away with a work agenda. Something that positions all of us, wherever we are, but especially the Academy, to know how to push forward in the coming year to really advance innovation and to help remove obstacles and to fill gaps so that more people who are trying to make progress can find the way, as Dean Knott said. I want to elevate those best practices so that more people know what techniques are working and how to apply them where they are. So today is the first of a 4-part series. We're going from Sacramento to Austin at the end of September, where we'll talk about innovations in cities. Then we'll be at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University at the beginning of October to talk about citizenship and public service. What is it that's motivating and demotivating people from careers in public service these days? And how do we encourage the future of public service amongst our new generations? And then we're going to wrap it up at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, trying to put together all the things that we will have heard in the first 3 sessions about the different layers of governance with the challenges facing the nation in infrastructure, because they intersect. And we want to make sure that we have a nation with the capacity, the governance capacity at all levels, to execute major national programs. And if we can figure out how to do it in infrastructure that's a little bit more objective, maybe we can figure out how to do it in things like education and healthcare and housing that tend to get much more emotional. So we're going to try that through the fall. We welcome all of you. If you're just from Sacramento and you want to join us in Austin or New York or Virginia, please put them on your calendars. We welcome your attendance and your participation. You can see we're taking advantage of technology. We're live streaming today. We'll be tweeting if you want to follow us on Twitter. So we're trying to get the Academy technologically into the 21st century as well as conceptually into the 21st century. This is why I'm so thrilled that we are able to put today's event together and look at the changing role of states. And we grabbed 2 pretty non-controversial topics for our conversation today: environmental policy and healthcare policy. Right? It's like grabbing 2 lightning rods at once, and we'll see what happens in the course of the day.